I'm doing a piece of work about explaining the steps of football. The beautiful game, the common phrase used to describe football, I will go from the start and explain step by step how it's become the game from today. From the start, in 476 BC, China started a game called Kuju, which is their adaptation of what football is. That was played by hoops in the middle of the field, and the players stood each side, and the aim of the game was basically to kick the ball through the hoop. Next was something called village football, which was in 1580. This was also called mob football. The reason for this is because there was no rules in the slightest, other than the fact that common local neighbourhoods and villages used to play each other just for the pure of the glory of being the best in their neighbourhood. Between 1760 and 1820 was something called the Industrial Revolution, which was a time where people used to work 6 days a week, so there wasn't much time to play anything like football because they only had Sundays off, so it's not kind of the thing you want to do on your own day off. During that time, there was a few changes. Obviously, I've explained sport was affected by working long hours. Transport was also improved. So things like players could get around and play more further apart, so cities could play other cities from a long distance. Then, in 1850, a private school called Eton School talked about a new thing to introduce into football, which was the rules that we know today. These rules were things like penalties, scoring, and then goals, how to score goals. These rules were applied and was talked about but never applied until later on. Then in 1846, the factories were given more time to play football so that the workers actually could start participating in sport instead of working all the time. Then the next step is 1857, where the first rules were actually finally put in place within the leagues. And one of the first clubs, which is still a club today, is Sheffield FC. But the oldest club still in the Football League today is Notts County FC. After that step, in 1863, the FA was formed, which is one of the more important things of today. They run football along with FIFA, which I'll explain later on. In 1877, 90-minute matches were introduced. 1855, the crossbar was then put in place instead to replace a piece of wire or tape that was put over the top of two holes. Then in 1904, FIFA was also formed. So then they had FIFA and the FA in place to run football and create leagues, such as the Premier League, which was introduced later on. In 1907, the FA was introduced, which is Player Awards, which gives players a more common and gets them to be well known around the world and gives them that authority of being the world's best. In 1908, FIFA organised their first tournament, which was taking place in Uruguay. 1904 was when World War I started, which kind of gave football a big setback with all the bombs and stuff, which was bombed by Germany and took a lot of stadiums and things out. 1918, World War I ended, and then followed by 1930, when the first World Cup was taking place in Germany, and that was won by Uruguay. 1939, World War II began, which again set football back a lot and stopping all football because it was too dangerous to play. And in 1945 that ended, which then brought on the Euros, which was what we now know today as the other major competition for international teams other than the World Cup. Then in 1966, England's only moment of glory which we've ever had, they won the World Cup, which has never got close to doing again really. 1971, the Ibrox disaster in Rangers Stadium, which was a match between England and Scotland, which resulted in 25 deaths, 517 injuries, and it cost them £150,000 spent to improve and repair the stadium. Followed that was the Bradford fire, which was again a big setback, and it kind of put everyone back a bit, and that's when we started to look at how stadiums are built and how the development of the stadiums have become. During the Bradford fire, it was a match between Bradford and Lincoln. It is believed the fire started when a spectator dropped a match, cigarette or cigar down through the holes in the stand to rubbish which had accumulated below. One witness saw paper on fire about 9 inches below the floorboards. The stand did not have risers. This allowed a huge accumulation of rubbish below the floorboards, which where the fire had started. This actually killed 56 people and injured 265, which was a lot, because there were only around 7,000 people in the attendance, of which 2,000 was in that stand. Following the Bradford fire was the Hillsborough disaster, so again another big talking point of football, and after this they really started to take a look at how stadiums are, and that's why they've become such safe environments as they are today. During Hillsborough, 5,000 people entered the west stand where the disaster happened with fake tickets, at which point people were starting to be forced against the barrier, crushing them. Just no more than 15 minutes into the match, people started flooding onto the pitch, resulting in 96 people dead, of which 14 were admitted to hospital. And a further 766 people were injured. 78 of those were 30 and younger, 38 of those were between 10 and 19. So as you can see, the kind of statistics of how many people died and stuff just kind of gives you that bit of an influence on how bad it was. And it was all because of bad management of the semi-final between Forest and Liverpool. Then after that, in 1992, the Premier League starts, is what it's become today, also now known as the Barclays Premier League. The best season known to date in the Premier League is Arsenal, which was the season they won, now being called the Invincibles. They was unbeaten the whole season, and they had a great, one of the best teams the Premier League ever known, with Dennis Bergkamp and Thierry Henry. In 2002, Asia hosted their first World Cup. In 2001, the saying no to racism was introduced, which raised a stamp on black players being kind of forced out of the game, which wasn't necessary at all. It was unfair on them. And then in 2010, the Ballon d'Or was introduced. That kind of, if you earn this, then it's kind of you telling you you're the best player in the world, accordingly. This has been won 3 times by Lionel Messi of Argentina and Barcelona. And it's also been won once by Cristiano Ronaldo of Real Madrid in Portugal. Cristiano Ronaldo has been close twice now, winning second place twice, in 2008 and 2009.
Well done, different class. Hang on, Kris. Has anyone got any questions about that? Good presentation, yeah? I liked how you weren't looking at the screen all the time. And you were talking to your audience. Yeah, you've obviously researched it really well. Do you know of any other organisations that maybe have developed recently?
Just recently?
Is there anything, or is there any sort of agencies that help provide money for football? That you know of?
Not really.
Yeah, no, it's a general question, don't worry about it. Yeah? Good stuff. Happy days.